Right at the core of Christian theology, there's this puzzle, an idea that's had philosophers and theologians scratching their heads for centuries. And today we're jumping right into it, the logical problem of the Trinity. This is where faith and logic really go head to head.
How can 1 equal 3? I mean, on the surface, it just looks like bad math, right? But for almost 2,000 years, this question has been at the very center of the Trinity debate. So in this explainer, we're going to take the classic answer and put it through a serious logical stress test, all based on our source material. We'll break it all down step by step.
Okay, so first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what we're actually talking about. We're looking at the Nicene formula. This is the Orthodox Christian position, the one that was really locked in back in the 4th century. And it goes like this. God is one single being, that's ousia in the original Greek, who at the exact same time is 3 distinct persons, or hypostases. Everything we're about to discuss, it all starts right here.
All right, let's throw this doctrine into the logical gauntlet. First up is test number 1, the law of non-contradiction. This is like the most basic rule of all rational thought. It just says that something can't be true and false at the same time in the same way. You can't be both A and not A. Simple, right? So, how does the Trinity hold up?
So what's the defense here? How does the doctrine get around this? Well, Trinitarian thinkers have a very specific answer. They argue it's not a contradiction because it's all about separating the categories. See, God is one in being, but he's 3 in persons. And because being and person are 2 different things, they're not saying God is one and not one in the same respect. It's a key distinction.
So what's the verdict? Well, it passes. But, and this is a big but, it's kind of like it passes on a technicality. It squeaks by, avoiding a direct formal contradiction. The problem is, this whole solution hangs by a thread, this super rigid distinction between being and person. And as we're about to find out, that thread is going to get pulled on in our next few tests.
Okay, that brings us to our second test, which I'm calling the identity crisis. This is all about a really basic rule of logic that you and I use every single day without even thinking about it. It's called the transitive law of identity. It just means that if A equals C and B also equals C, then A has to equal B. It's just common sense, right?
But when you apply this simple logic to the Trinity, things get messy, fast. Let's walk through it. Step 1, a core belief is that the Father is God. Check. Step 2, another core belief is that the Son is God. Check. So if both of those things are true, what does logic tell us has to be the next step?
Therefore, the Father is the Son. Logically, that's where you have to land. But, and here's the crisis, that's a conclusion that Orthodox Christianity absolutely rejects. It says the Father and the Son are distinct persons. So now we're stuck in a real logical bind. How do theologians get out of this one?
Well, this is where a rescue attempt comes in. Some philosophers came up with a very specialized tool called relative identity theory. Now, this gets a little heady, but the basic idea is that sameness isn't always absolute. It can depend on the context. So instead of saying the Father is God, you'd say the Father is the same being as God. It's a subtle change in wording, but it's designed to let the Father and the Son be the same being without forcing them to be the same person. Pretty clever, right? But does it work? Yeah, not so much, according to our source material. The consensus is that this rescue attempt doesn't really fly. Why not? Well, for starters, most mainstream philosophers just don't buy it. They call it an ad hoc solution, which is a fancy way of saying it's a rule that was made up on the spot just to fix this one problem. It's like changing the rules of the game halfway through. It also completely redefines what sameness even means. So because of all this, our sources conclude that on this test, the doctrine fails.
All right, this brings us to our third and final test. And honestly, this one might be the most intuitive of them all, the consciousness dilemma. We're moving away from abstract logic a little bit and getting into something we can all relate to. What does it actually mean to be a person?
So here's the question at the heart of it all. In the one God, is there one center of consciousness, or are there 3? I mean, if you have 3 distinct persons, do you have 3 separate minds? 3 different wills? Or is it all just one mind, one consciousness?
And this question, well, it puts the doctrine in a really tough spot. It's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Go one way, and you've got problems. Go the other way, you've got different problems. If you say yes, there are 3 distinct minds, our sources point out that you're basically talking about 3 gods. That's a heresy called tritheism. But if you say no, there's only one mind, one will, then the so-called persons start to look a lot more like masks or different roles played by a single actor. And that's another heresy called modalism. Orthodox teaching says both are wrong, but it seems to be logically trapped right in the middle.
So, we've walked through the challenges, and now our source material shifts gears. It moves from pointing out the problems to proposing a solution. It's an alternative model that's designed to solve these exact logical puzzles. It's called the perfect agent model.
Now, to get our heads around this model, there's one really important word we need to know: aseity. It sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty straightforward. In classical theology, aseity is the defining thing about God. It means God's existence comes from himself. He's uncaused, he's not derived from anything else, he's totally independent. He's the buck stops here, ultimate source of everything. So, here's the absolute key to the perfect agent model. Only the Father has aseality, period. In this view, he alone is God in that ultimate uncaused sense. The Son, then, is a derived being. His existence comes from the Father. And his divinity? That comes from being the Father's perfect and supreme agent, acting with the Father's total authority. The upshot is that this keeps monotheism, the belief in one God, perfectly intact, with no contradictions.
And the sources we're looking at use a really great analogy to explain this. Think about a king's ambassador. The ambassador isn't literally the king. He's not the same being or ontologically the same as a philosopher would say. But when that ambassador speaks, he carries the king's full authority. It's as if the king himself is speaking. He is the king functionally. And in this model, the Son is basically God's perfect ambassador.
Okay, so we've run all the tests, we've looked at an alternative, so how does it all shake out? Our source material actually gives us a final tally, a kind of logical audit, where it ranks these different models against each other.
And here it is, the final scorecard according to this analysis. You can see the perfect agent model gets the #1 spot, mainly for what the source calls its total logical integrity. It argues this model gets rid of the paradoxes. Modalism comes in second. And the more traditional Trinitarian views, well, they're ranked lower because, as the argument goes, they end up having to fall back on just mystery, or what's seen as circular logic.
So, what are we supposed to make of all this? Really, what this entire breakdown shows is this deep, fundamental tension between philosophy and theology. And trust me, it's a tension that has been around for a very, very long time. The bottom line from the sources we've been exploring is pretty clear. The traditional Nicene formula, when you put it under a powerful logical microscope, really seems to struggle. And so, an alternative, something like the perfect agent model, is put on the table as an option that's just, well, more logically coherent. And that really leaves us with one big final question, and it's a deep one. Should we even hold theology to the same logical standards as philosophy? Is it fair to expect matters of faith to follow the cold, hard rules of logic? Or is theology playing a different game altogether, one that operates in a realm of divine mystery, where our human rules just don't apply? That's something for you to chew on.